Well, it is my privilege to introduce this person right here. She works in the spiritual development office as a chapel programs administrator. She's worked for 30 years with Crew in college campuses all across the world. She is a constant and consistent speaker at family life marriage conferences across the nation. She co-teaches the relationships class with her husband Tim, the Graces, and the Langers. Help me welcome Noreen Muehlhoff.
Thank you. Thanks.
So Noreen, you've been at Biola for a little bit and across the world on college campuses. What do you notice about dating at Biola and in Christian places?
Well, let's see. Yeah, so we've been here this is our 14th year at Biola. And I would say that dating's kind of a mess. It seems like, and sadly, it hasn't changed a lot in those 14 years. And it's not just Biola. So I guess that's the good news. Like, it's not, people talk about the Biola bubble, and this is not a Biola problem. It is pretty consistent on Christian campuses around the country. It's consistent even within Christian ministries, parachurch ministries, that dating can just be a little bit confusing. And so, and it's different than maybe your friends that are on secular campuses don't deal with some of the same issues that we deal with. But I think it's a little bit, I would describe it as stunted or limited, confusing, and maybe not always healthy.
It seems like you've thought about this for a while. And again, you've worked on colleges, campuses, and you've been here for 14 years. What made you so interested in dating?
Because we're relational people, right? So relationships are important to us. They're formative. And then dating relationships have a unique place, right? So people tend to be very interested in them. And what I have seen is that when dating relationships are done well, they can be a great blessing. When they are not done well, they can be really detrimental. So I think what keeps me interested and involved in this conversation about dating, it's not just that I want like a bunch of happy people dating, but I just see how valuable dating can be as a tool to grow and to develop and to learn, and that when it's not done well, I have seen people's lives really derailed, and mistakes made that really have consequences. So if we can get ahead of that and maybe give people some information that will help them avoid some of those traps and avoid being derailed, that is kind of what keeps me in the conversation.
So you said that dating in Christian circles is kind of stunted. If I gave you a magic wand, right, and I said, hey, everyone in this room is going to have one definition of dating, what would the ground rules be?
So this is part of the problem. I tend to use the word casual dating, and I think that's not a great term anymore. So I need to figure out a new term to use. But because I think casual dating has a little bit of a hookup connotation these days. So I obviously that is not what I'm promoting. What I do want is I want people to not get so freaked out about dating and then go into all these like weird states about it. So if I could wave my wand, and we've kidded about this, like if there's some way that we could sort of create this amnesty for a week at Biola and have everybody just date with this mindset, I would love to see what it would be like. And that would be that the purpose of a date is to get to know somebody. It's to interact with somebody who's created in the image of God, who can help you understand yourself better, that where you can see your strengths and your weaknesses, and it helps you understand maybe what kind of partner you need and what kind of partner you're going to be. But I think the danger comes in that most people would think, and as I ask students to finish the sentence, a successful dating relationship results in blank.
Marriage.
That's usually what we hear. And I don't think that's the case.
That's good.
And so it's not that I'm against marriage or that dating can't necessarily lead to marriage. But I think just because most marriages begin with dating, people assume that successful dating should end in marriage.
Right.
And I think a successful dating relationship ends in encouraging someone, honoring someone, knowing them better, knowing yourself better.
Right.
That it's all about the growth process.
Right.
And if one of those dating relationships ends in marriage, that's fine.
Right.
But a dating relationship is not a failure if it doesn't result in marriage.
Right.
So, and I was kind of
profound. I hear profound laughter right here. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of other purposes and wonderful benefits of dating that aren't going to be marriage. So when we start with that, you've heard the term like we should start with the end in mind.
Okay.
So when people think marriage is the end and you start with that, it puts way too much pressure on the relationship to begin. So again, going back to your question of how would I define it, I would want it to be much more relaxed. I would want it to be about getting to know the other person. I would want it to be always in a context of honor. I would want it to be about getting to know yourself. Great. And learning and growing personally, even practicing. Like these are interpersonal skills we need to practice.
Yeah.
So why not get in the habit of practicing those and developing that muscle so you're going to be better at it?
Awesome, awesome. Well,
that would be my definition.
I love that. I love that definition. And it seems like what you're saying is dating is part and should be a natural part of our spiritual growth process.
Yeah.
How does dating help or hinder our spiritual formation?
Yeah. Well, that depends. Like it could help or it could hinder.
Yeah.
It all depends on how you think about it, how you execute it.
Yeah.
And that's what I was talking about. One of the reasons I stay motivated to be in this conversation is that I've seen both of those results.
Right.
I've seen it where it really derail somebody from their walk with the Lord. They get too focused on the relationship. They compromise themselves in ways, and I'm not just talking about physical compromise, but even goals and dreams. Right. People that think, this is how the Lord has made me, and this is where He's leading me, and people give that up because they're dating somebody that's going in another direction. So I think. When dating is done well, it is a great part of your spiritual formation because you're learning how to listen, you're learning how to care, you're learning how to understand, you're learning how to partner. Who do you work with well, and what could that look like, and what kind of vision? You learn how to spur another on to good works and deeds. Right. Those are all great parts of a healthy dating relationship. Yeah. On the other side, it can go, like I said, it can go really badly and distract from growing.
Just to reflect something, those seem like components of any relationship that seem healthy.
Right.
Now this one is just a little bit more particularized.
Right. Yeah, and I guess, so the difference is, that's right, because most of the way I describe dating, people say, that sounds like friendship. Right. Well, yeah. Okay. Because I think...
That's how it starts, right?
Right. In my opinion, again, I think friendship needs to be the foundation for any dating relationship.
Yeah, that's good.
And so it is going to share almost every characteristic of a friendship. But the only difference is, and this is where people get weirded out, is that it has the potential of moving to a different status. It's not a better status or worse, so, because sometimes people think like friendship is here and dating is here and marriage is here. Okay. And I don't want to rank them. I think they're just a different status and a different expression. Yeah. So I think people get weirded out because it is this friendship that could lead to a different status, which could be dating, which could lead to another status, which is marriage. So there are some elements in there that call for a little bit more discernment, and maybe a little bit more awareness of self and other that before you move to that next step.
Okay. So, personal question.
Okay.
How did you know that Tim was the one?
There's the issue is like, was he a one? Okay. Like, in that, was there enough about him that I knew that I could marry him? Yeah. So the groundwork on that obviously is I knew that he had a strong walk with the Lord. We were in ministry together, so that's how we met. We were first neighbors, actually. We lived next door to each other. We worked in the same ministry with Crew at Miami University. So I knew that he had a heart for ministry. I knew that we had fun together, that we really enjoyed our time together. There was something, though, and this is where the process of getting to know self and other through dating really helped me, was that one thing I noticed in our relationship was that conversation flowed easily. It wasn't difficult, it wasn't awkward, it wasn't hard. And that was something that had been missing in my previous dating relationship. And my previous dating relationship, great guy, like still would have met that. He had a great walk with the Lord, had a heart for ministry. But there was just something about the two of us together that didn't work. So when I got into a dating relationship with Tim, and those things started firing, I'm like, oh, this is different. This is like, I could see myself partnering with him long term. We're really different people in a lot of ways, but our core beliefs and worldview and values are the same. But our personalities are very different. So the good thing in that is that I felt like we were also a good team, that we could see things in each other we might not see in ourselves. We could encourage each other. We could correct each other when necessary. I even think like there's no way I would be sitting up on this stage this morning if I hadn't had Tim in my life to encourage me and support me.
Awesome.
So that's how I decided.
Awesome. Okay, hey, we're going to call a timeout here. Okay. And we're going to ask you guys to text in and social media in questions for us, and we will answer them after our reflection song. You ready for this, Noreen?
I hope so.
Okay, here we go. Let's answer some of the questions. Here's our first question. How do you avoid making a dating relationship grounded in fulfilling one's desires and aim for one that glorifies Christ?
That's, even that question shows me like you're thinking along the right lines.
That's right.
Grounded in fulfilling one's desires and aim for glory. That's going to be a lot about community. Because one of the mistakes I think I see in dating at Biola is that they tend to isolate themselves. So this couple becomes just by themselves all the time. And I think that when you have people involved in your lives, they're going to help you see that this is becoming too much about you and not enough about glorifying Christ or continuing your walk with the Lord. So I think staying in community is going to be really important and not isolating.
No, that's so huge, because sometimes we get into a relationship and we expect this person to fulfill
all their needs. And that's never going to happen.
Community thing. That's good. Okay, great. Here's another question. How do I respectfully tell somebody that I don't want to go on a second date? Respectfully. No, and you know what? And that's great, because I always talk about in the context of honor. So that includes respect. So, one, I say good for you if you're being asked out on a second date, because I think there's a lot of people that doesn't happen to, and they're a little bummed about that. But honesty is really important here, because if you're going to care for the other person's heart, a big part of that is not leading them on. So you do want to not just like keep going out on dates because the person keeps asking, because then they could become emotionally tied and think that there's more there in the relationship than there is. So I do think that you have to be clear and honest but careful. So to choose your words carefully and say, thank you so much, and I do really appreciate that, but I'm just not interested at this time. And you release them to go love on someone else. So you said emotionally tied, right? So I think I've heard you say this before, that there's a place to be emotionally and physically more tied eventually in a relationship, but in the beginning we kind of want to be careful. And
that for me, that would be one of the key components, or in like the definition of casual dating, which again I need to find a new I was thinking maybe non-romantic dating, but that doesn't really flow either, but that kind of gives you the idea. So I think that when you start a relationship, even when in these early stages of dating, that your emotional sharing and your emotional involvement and physical involvement should be really limited. And that's one of the components that is going to protect your heart and protect the other person's heart and allow you not to get enmeshed when you shouldn't be. And as the relationship grows, your emotional involvement will deepen. Your physical involvement can only go so far, but the emotional involvement deepens as the relationship grows. But it needs to start off protecting those enmeshments.
That's right, and that's an honoring way.
Right.
Great. Here's another question. How do you know when you are personally ready for a serious dating relationship?
Yeah. Because that's a great question, because some people think, the only reason they're not dating is because nobody's asking. But I do think that is a great question to always ask is, am I ready? So there's a couple of, I would say, like red lights. If there are things going on in your life that, like deep emotional hurts and traumas that you are still in the early process of recovering from. Because what I don't want to say is like once you become healthy, then you're ready to date. Because, we're always going to carry some baggage and some scars, and we're never going to arrive at that point. But there is this point where you need help carrying that baggage.
Right.
And if you're at that place, you're probably not ready to date. So that might look like body image issues, eating disorders, addictions, substance abuse, pornography. If those kind of things are a part of your life on a regular basis, I would want to see you work toward health by yourself on that.
Or with community.
Not by yourself, I mean not by dating. In a community and even with professional help. So whether that be counseling, pastor, but not enter into a dating relationship while trying to work on these things.
Yep, great. Here's another question, okay? In light of what we just talked about, what is the correct way of asking someone on a date without making it awkward?
Well, I can tell you what is awkward, right? When the guy says something like, I got a word from the Lord, and you're the woman I'm supposed to marry, right?
That happens to that side of the room a lot, apparently.
But I mean, and there's all kinds of versions of that, but I hear that. Like that people say, I've been praying and fasting about this, and the Lord has laid you on my heart that I should pursue, and I've watched you, and I think you would be a great mother to my child.
Whoa.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like
that's on the wow.
Yes. So because it's that idea of courtship, which is like if I'm gonna date, I have to know ahead of time that I could marry this person. And it puts a truckload of pressure on a relationship that can't withstand it and shouldn't withstand it. So those would be all the things I would avoid. So what I would want it to be very casual and just saying, hey, I would love the chance to get to know you better, and could we grab a cup of coffee and a bagel? Could we, go out for ice cream? And do something that is not highly romantic, so you're not going out like on Valentine's Day to a really fancy restaurant. But you're doing something that communicates where you are, which is, I just want to get to know you, so let's do that in a casual environment.
Great.
That would keep it from
so practical. Awkward. Awesome. Here's another question. If someone feels like God is telling them to wait on getting into a relationship, do you think it's okay for them to go on a date with a guy just to get to know him better, even though you can't pursue a relationship right now?
Okay. There's a lot there.
Sounds like something that's happening right now in that person's life.
Well, one, you always listen to the Lord, right? So this could be tricky. So I'm saying, yes, you listen to the Lord, and if somebody asks you out on a date and you think this could lead to a temptation to not listen to the Lord anymore, then it might be good to say, yeah, you know what, I'm not ready for that right now. And that's okay. But if we're talking about one date, like it's a first date and it's super casual and you don't know this person, that's fine, but just know that you may be then setting yourself up for having to turn down a second date. Because I would not, again, if you're clear that God is leading you to not be in a relationship right now, then it makes sense not to not to start on that track.
So can I go on a friend date to get to know them better, but just be clear, hey, we might not be able to continue this because of where I am. Is that okay, or? Yeah,
I think you could say, I'd certainly love to get to know you and would love to be friends. I just want you to know that I'm really not in a position where I'm pursuing a relationship right now. That's totally fine.
Great.
Again, you're protecting your heart, you're protecting their heart, and you're doing it in a context of honor. You're not leading them on.
Awesome. Okay, here's another question. Do you have practical tips on how to evaluate if you can still be friends with someone after a dating relationship has ended? Or how to learn more about yourself as you've broken up with someone?
Okay, so when you break up, even the best relationships, there's probably going to be a little bit of awkwardness because you're transitioning, right? Yep. You're transitioning back. I think, and I was talking with a student recently who was in a dating relationship. So again, a non-romantic dating relationship. They were talking, they were getting to know each other, they were enjoying each other's company, and they've decided not to pursue it any further. But because they were not too emotionally involved, because they were not physically involved, they have been able to return to a friendship. Now, it, again, took a little bit transition time, but they were able to do that. So I think when the dating relationship has been healthy, it's a little bit easier. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have a broken heart or that you may not need time. But when the dating relationship is healthy, when you break up, you don't despise that person. It's not like I can't stand seeing them. Right.
Yeah, awesome. Here's another question.
Yeah, we moved on.
Is it okay for girls to ask out guys? As a girl, that's right. I love that. As a girl, I am okay with this, but I'm not sure if guys are.
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry for all the guys in the world.
Yeah, and that varies. That really does vary. So is it okay for girls to ask out guys? I guess so. I think, in fact, our class, one of the assignments is that they have to initiate with somebody of the opposite gender. So I think that's fine. It's like, what kind of pattern do you want to set? And I think that's kind of a way you could find out if the guy has some similar values. So if you ask him out and he's really put off by that, then it's probably not a guy that you would be interested in, and that's okay. And if a guy is put off by that, you need to allow him that freedom, right? So if you feel the freedom to ask him out, he has the freedom to say no. So I say, give it a try, and that'll help you discern what kind of guy you're going to be dating.
That's good. Guys, just say yes, though, okay? Yeah. Just say yes. All right.
Always say yes.
All right, here's another question. Since dating can potentially lead to marriage, would you say that there are difficulties in beginning to date long before you feel that you're at the age that you're able to get married at?
Yeah, the timeline issue. Anytime you date, it could lead to marriage. But I would say, and then there's a study done by a professor from the University of Texas that talked about longevity in relationships and sort of what's the ideal amount of time to date before getting married that results in successful marriages. And his timeline had it at about 2.5 years. So even if you don't think you're ready to get married today, that may happen during the process. If you are 18 years old and you know that you're going to go to grad school and med school and, then you may want to just keep your dates at that very non-romantic stage and not move on. But I still think you can date and you can practice those skills but keep it at the non-romantic level and be cautious about moving on if you really know that you're not ready to get married.
Great. In preparing for this, we found a study, right, Noreen, that showed about how many percent of people meet their partner in college.
So, and I think this is going to be surprising because we talk about students tend to freak out a little bit because they feel like they've got to find their spouse here because you're at Biola and this is the biggest number of Christian singles you'll ever be exposed to in your life. And if I don't find one here, I'm going to be single for life, as if that's the worst thing ever. So I was reading a study recently, and it said that currently less than 10% of married couples met their spouses in college.
Wow.
Which means 90% of people that are married did not meet their spouse in college, which means there's a lot of other ways that God may bring somebody into your life, and it doesn't have to be here, so you don't have to force something that's not there.
So ring by spring is the anomaly.
Not the norm. We need to, and if it happens, okay.
If it happens, great, right?
Right, yeah. It's not like I'm anti-engagement, but I do think, waiting. There's also another study that shows sort of the rate of divorce has decreased as the age of people getting married has increased. As people hopefully are more mature entering into marriage, that helps in reducing divorce. So I also am a proponent of waiting, but so I'm not anti-ring by spring. What I don't like is the pressure that brings for people to make decisions they really are not ready to make.
Great, absolutely. Thank you. Here's another question. I don't understand girls. Help. What are practical steps for students to help improve Biola's dating culture?
Okay, so if you don't understand girls, I understand that, but look for group opportunities to understand them. Like maybe if you really don't understand girls, the best way is not to start by trying to go on one-on-one dates. So use group opportunities, classroom opportunities to get to know girls a little bit better. And then begin initiating, begin practicing, use that muscle and try it out. And through that process of sitting one-on-one with a girl and having a conversation, you'll begin to understand girls a little better.
Awesome. Here is our final question, which is, Noreen, hey, we ask all of this to our Biola Hour guests. What are some biblical principles that help shape your thoughts for this topic?
So again, since I see dating as really an expansion or a type of relationship, what really comes to mind for me are all the one another's, right? The scriptures are filled with verses that tell us how we should interact and treat one another. And I thought, what if the dating relationships at Biola were characterized by things like 1 Thessalonians 5:11, which says, I wrote it down so I wouldn't miss it. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Or if it was characterized by Romans 12:10 that says, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor. Like, what would that do to our community if that was the attitude we had in dating? What would that do for how we care for one another, love one another? What would that do for how we decide if and when we're going to get married? And the kind of impact that we could have on this campus and the community and really for the kingdom. Because again, it's not just about making sure that there's a lot of happy dating couples at Biola. That's insignificant to me. It's the big picture of the kind of impact that we can have when we honor and care for one another well.
Biola University prepares Christians to think biblically about everything, from science to business to education and the arts. Learn more at biola.edu.